It is big crane time, and this one is the Manitowoc MLC300, made by Towsleys. It comes in a big outer shipping carton, so we'll open that up first, and when we lift the flaps there's another piece of cardboard. But when we take that off we can see the Manitowoc box inside. After plenty of arm exercise we can get the big box out and open up its flaps. And after even more arm exercise we can pull out the expanded polystyrene trays. The top tray has got a lid, and there we can see all the parts nicely wrapped in soft paper, and that applies to the middle tray and also to the bottom tray. Well, with all those parts it's good that the assembly manual numbers each of them in each of the 3 trays, and then it takes you through step-by-step instructions to build the model in its full configuration. The manual is very clear and very good, although there seems to be 1 or 2 small errors and omissions. There are reeving diagrams for everything but the hooks, and it only covers the full configuration and not any other setups that are possible with this model. We will start the assembly by following the order of the instructions, and here's the nice undercarriage with its free rolling crawler tracks. It looks like each track frame is removable, but we'll press on and add the rotating bed, and that gets dropped in and you secure it with a screw. This needs to be fairly tight so the model doesn't rock, and on the review model we had to add an extra washer into the screw to get the tightness we wanted. Before going further we just check the rotation. Next we assemble the thing that makes this crane special, and that's the variable position counterweight mechanism. It is made up of a few separate components and you have to clip them together carefully. And some parts, like this one, is actually screwed into position. The instructions for this are all good enough, so you just have to follow them carefully. And the only issue you might find is that some of the sliding bits are a little bit of a tight fit. So, as always, you need to try to ease things together rather than force them with a heavy hand. Once we've got it all assembled, then we can offer it up and insert it onto the rotating bed. Once that's in, you can then connect up the energy chain. And then we can move to the back and add in the counterweight support pad. And that's held in position simply with just 4 steel pins. Now at this stage we're still following the assembly manual, and that describes adding in these walkways, but actually there's a step missing, and we'll come to that soon. After the walkways, the manual tells us to attach the cab, and the connection is made by inserting a pin. But to make that easy, one tip is to use a smaller screwdriver and just lever the holes so that they line up. And then that makes it easier to drop the pin in. And no, my fingers haven't turned into metal, I'm using a pair of pliers to make getting the pin in even easier. At this point we'll now move on and build up the boom, the backmast and the jib. These are nicely engineered parts and you make the connections using tiny nuts and bolts. And because they really are tiny nuts and bolts, some tools are provided to help you do them up. So this is nice precision model engineering. And the only thing to make sure of is that you don't do the nuts and bolts up too tightly, because otherwise you risk doing some damage. The bolts do come in a variety of different lengths, but they are in numbered bags. And as long as you follow the assembly manual, you can use the right bolts in the right place. Now the manual does show the backmast assembly incorrectly and 2 sections need to be reversed. And this has probably arisen because there's a conflict between Manitowoc marketing information and Manitowoc technical information. But we will replicate the way the real crane is assembled. We're also going to deviate from the assembly sequence in the manual, and that's because I want to pose the model first with just the backmast assembled. So we're going to install the backmast first by screwing it into its attachment position. Now at this point I also realised there was an assembly stage missing from the manual. And that stage is the insertion of the car body jacks, and that really wants to be done at the start of the assembly. Anyway, we'll do it now, so we'll fold out the jack assemblies, And after the jacks have been screwed in, we can fold them back into position and replace the walkway. Because I want to pose the model just in a partially assembled state, I need to add some of the detailing. And we'll start by adding on 4 sets of access steps, 2 on each track frame. Then there are a number of metal handrails to add, and these just slot into preformed holes. The only issue is that the fit sometimes isn't so good, with the result that the handrail pieces are too loose in the holes and they're easily dislodged. The crane only has the backmast on at the moment, so we'll move the counter tray right in and then add on the counterweight slabs. And to restrain them, lengths of chain are supplied which can be wrapped around the lifting lugs. We'll now move round to the other side of the crane where there are plenty more handrails to be attached. And again, some of them are too loose, so you need to pad out the holes to keep them tight. So here is the crane assembled with just the backmast. But one thing you can't do is lower the backmast right down because there's not enough rope on the drum. We will now move on to attach the boom, and we'll start by offering up the boom butt to the rotating bed. And this connection is engineered really well because it's nice and smooth and easy to get the pin in. With the boom assembled, we need to reeve up the luffing gear, and we'll do that in a totally unrealistic way up in the air. Some temporary support called string is used to hold the luffing gear in place, and after the reeving is complete we can wind in on the luffing drum, and that relieves the tension in our temporary string, and then we can unhook it and remove it. One good thing is there's enough rope on the drum to be able to lower the boom completely, and here you can see that the main load block has been reeved up. It looks like the operator's a bit rough on the controls, but in fact the winch drums are mostly very good because they've got a nice positive brake action. Now we'll winch up the boom ready for work, and we'll put the fly jib on later in the video. Looking at some of the detail we haven't already seen, it's interesting to look under the car body and see the engine and fans. And all of the boom sections are really nicely made. They have lifting eyes, there's nice mesh walkways, and some of the smaller parts like these drums are nice because the drums can actually be rolled. The model is also excellent because it's been engineered to be flexible. So things like these struts are not riveted, they are bolted together, so they can be unbolted and lowered for transport. The track frames are very good and they've got moving lifting points. And the metal track pads are very nice too, but the track frames are simple because they have no working rollers. It is a highly detailed model and you can see that with these graphics on the back of the cab. And even though they're tiny, they are quite sharp. Looking at the counterweight slabs, they've got weight markings. And the lifting lugs are usable if you wanted to pose them being lifted, and all of the graphics on the model are sharp. Also the handrails and ladders all look realistic enough. All of the straps on the model are made of thin metal, and on the review model they all had a reasonable equalised tension, so none were sagging unrealistically. All of the sheaves on the model are metal, and 3 load blocks are supplied, and they're nice enough pieces. One of the features of the model is that the various parts do make very good transport loads, so you can show something off even if you're space restricted. The model does have a tilting operator's cab, but on the review model it was a bit too loose so it wouldn't hold a pose. But rotation of the model was certainly very good, and as long as the screw was done up tight enough at the start of the assembly process, there was no rocking. The interesting feature of this crane is the variable position counterweight. The model has the VPC Max system, and it works well with this outer part sliding in and out. And the whole purpose of this system is that you can set the counterweight to balance the loads that you're lifting, so you don't need load trays or trailers or as much ground preparation as other cranes require. So we've built the crane up with just a main boom, but now we'll add on the luffing fly jib. And to be totally unrealistic, we'll assemble it up in the air. Here you can see the parts rigged so we can reeve up the luffing ropes. And we used a fishing weight to try and keep the tension on the ropes. But be warned, this is fiddly and irritating reeving, in part because the sheaves are loose on the axles and there are gaps between them. One other small issue on the review model was that the rope on the main winch drum spools off the front and not the back, but it's something you could rewind correctly. With the model fully built up, let's do a dim check and see how tall it is. And to the top of the main boom, it's about 43 inches or 110 centimeters. And if we go large with the full luffing jib, it's about 67 inches or 170 centimeters. This model has been produced by Towsleys and engineered by Rice Brothers, and it's another really nice Manitowoc crane model. It has a very high metal content and detail level, the functionality is generally very good, and a real plus point is the flexibility and the fact that it can be built up in many configurations. Overall, it is excellent.